It's time for an overhaul!
Mask hit theaters in July of 1994 and did something almost nobody predicted. It turned a relatively unknown comic book property into a $351 million global phenomenon, launched one of the most electric comedic performances in Hollywood history, and introduced the world to a 19-year-old actress who would become one of the most photographed women on the planet. But what happened when the Greene face came off in 2026 is more dramatic, more heartbreaking, and more surprising than anything that spun across that screen. We're talking about a comedian who conquered Hollywood and then walked away from the very machine that built him. A leading lady whose rise was as dazzling as any film she ever appeared in. Supporting players whose real lives carried scandal, reinvention, and quiet tragedy. And one cast member whose story took a turn so dark, it shocked everyone who thought they knew him. Let's see where they all ended up.
Freeze!
Number 1. We have Jim Carrey as Stanley Ipkiss. Stanley was the ultimate everyman, a mild-mannered, endlessly pushed-around bank clerk whose entire life transforms the moment he slips on an ancient Norse mask and becomes the physical embodiment of his own suppressed energy. Jim Carrey was 32 years old when the mask was released, and he delivered a performance so physically demanding, so genuinely original, that it redefined what live-action comedy could look like on screen. What most fans never knew is how close Jim Carrey came to never making this film at all. In 1994 alone, he released 3 films: Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, a trifecta that earned over $550 million combined and made him the hottest comedic actor on the planet virtually overnight. But behind that eruption of success was a man carrying serious personal weight. Jim has spoken openly about suffering from severe depression throughout his life, a condition he managed largely without medication for years, relying instead on the very performance energy that made him famous. Then came the artistic pivot nobody fully anticipated. After blockbuster after blockbuster, Jim Carrey deliberately stepped away from pure comedy, choosing The Truman Show in 1998, Man on the Moon in 1999, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in 2004. 3 performances that earned him Golden Globe wins and critical respect of an entirely different order. He proved the rubber face contained a serious actor all along. In recent years, Jim has retreated significantly from Hollywood, focusing on painting, philosophy, and public commentary that is frequently as strange and fascinating as anything he ever performed. In 2026, Jim Carrey is 64 years old. The man who made the whole world laugh turned out to be one of its most genuinely complex artistic souls. Stanley Ipkiss just wanted to be seen. Turns out, so did Jim.
Nothing too good for a boy that's...
Number 2. We have Cameron Diaz as Tina Carlisle. Tina Carlisle was the luminous, quick-witted singer caught between Stanley's genuine heart and a gangster's dangerous world. And Cameron Diaz played her with a confidence and magnetism that made everyone forget this was her very first film role. She was just 21 years old, no prior acting credits, discovered through a modeling agency and cast directly into a $23 million production opposite the hottest comedian in Hollywood. Here's something wild. Cameron Diaz almost didn't get the role. She auditioned repeatedly, faced significant resistance from the studio, who wanted a more established name, and ultimately won the part through sheer persistence and an undeniable screen presence that the camera simply couldn't ignore. The gamble paid off in a way that changed her entire life. What came next was one of the most consistent runs in Hollywood history for any actress of her generation. The Mask led directly to The Last Supper, then Best, Friend's Wedding, then There's Something About Mary, a film that earned over $369 million and made her a global superstar, Charlie's Angels, Gangs of New York, $1 Million Baby, Shrek, 4 films as Princess Fiona. Her career earnings across 20 years placed her among the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood history. Then 2026, Cameron Diaz is 53 years old. The 21-year-old who walked into a Coco Bongo club and stopped every room she entered turned out to be the only person in Hollywood brave enough to walk away from all of it on her own terms. Number 3, we have Peter Riegert as Lieutenant Kellaway. Kellaway was the dogged, perpetually exasperated detective, convinced that Stanley Ipkiss is behind every piece of chaos tearing through Edge City, and Peter Riegert played him with a dry, slow-burning frustration that became one of the film's most reliable comedic engines. He was 46 years old during filming, a seasoned character actor with a career stretching back to Animal House in 1978. What most fans never knew is how deeply Peter Riegert committed to serious dramatic work, running parallel to his comedic roles throughout his career. He received an Emmy nomination for his performance in the 1994 television film Barbarians at the Gate, the same year The Mask was released, demonstrating a range that his comedic work often overshadowed in the public eye. In 2026, Peter Riegert is 78 years old and still working. The detective who could never catch the mask turned out to have the most enduring career in the room.
Declare.
Oh, I don't know, Peggy. Ramsey said.
Number 4, we have Amy Yasbeck as Peggy Brandt. Peggy was Stanley's closest friend, the newspaper reporter who ultimately betrays him to Dorian's gang in one of the film's sharpest plot turns. Amy Yasbeck played her with genuine warmth that made the betrayal land harder than it might have with a less likable actress. She was 30 years old during filming, already familiar to audiences from Wings and Pretty Woman. But here's where Amy Yasbeck's story takes a turn that has nothing to do with Hollywood and everything to do with real life at its most devastating. In 1998, Amy's husband, beloved comedian and actor John Ritter, star of Three's Company and 8 Simple Rules, collapsed on set and was rushed to emergency surgery. He died that same night on September 11th, 2003, from an undetected aortic dissection. He was 54 years old. Amy was at his side. In 2026, Amy Yasbeck is 62 years old. The actress who played a woman who betrayed the man who loved her turned out to be, in real life, one of the most devoted and purposeful partners any person could have hoped for.
So how do we get in? What do you...
Number 5, we have Richard Jeni as Charlie Shoemaker. Charlie was Stanley's wisecracking best friend at the bank, the fast-talking, quick-laughing voice of regular guy sanity in a film that had very little of it. Richard Jeni played him with natural comedic rhythm and a timing so sharp it held its own against Jim Carrey, which in 1994 was no small achievement. He was 34 years old during filming and was widely considered one of the finest stand-up comedians of his entire generation. Here's the detail that stops you cold. On March 10, 2007, Richard Jeni died by suicide at his home in Los Angeles. He was 49 years old. Friends, colleagues, and fans were devastated. In the years that followed, those who knew him best spoke about a man who had battled severe depression and psychosis privately for years, while continuing to perform publicly, wearing the same mask in a different sense that Stanley Ipkiss wore in the film that made Richard Jeni a household name. In 2026, Richard Jeni would have been 65 years old. One of the most genuinely gifted comedic minds of his era, gone far too soon and remembered far too rarely. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988.
Mischief. Supposedly he caused so much trouble that Odin banned.
Number 6, we have Ben Stein as Dr. Arthur Newman. Dr. Newman was Stanley's psychiatrist, the dry, unflappable therapist who listens to increasingly impossible stories with the expression of a man who has simply stopped being surprised. by anything. Ben Stein played him with the signature monotone delivery that had already made him one of the most recognizable comic presences in America since Ferris Bueller's Day Off in 1986. He was 49 years old during filming, something most fans never knew. Ben Stein is one of the most genuinely unusual career stories in this entire cast. Before he ever set foot on a film set, he was a speechwriter for President Richard Nixon and President Gerald Ford, a practicing attorney, an economics professor, a syndicated columnist. The acting career was almost an accident that outlasted everything else. In 2026, Ben Stein is 81 years old. The man who played a therapist who couldn't believe what he was hearing turned out to have lived a life even a therapist couldn't have predicted. Number 7. We have Peter Greene as Dorian Tyrell. Dorian Tyrell was the film's cold-blooded primary villain, a ruthless gangster whose controlled menace provided the perfect dark counterweight to Jim Carrey's explosive chaos. Peter Greene played him with an intensity so convincing that the role immediately flagged him as one of Hollywood's most promising character actors. He was 30 years old during filming, and Dorian Tyrell remains one of the finest villain performances of that entire decade. And here's the twist that makes this entry remarkable. Peter Greene's career trajectory after The Mask should have been a straight line upward. Instead, it became one of Hollywood's most frustrating cautionary tales. Substance abuse issues derailed opportunities repeatedly throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. Roles that seemed certain didn't materialize. The momentum that Dorian Tyrell built didn't carry the way it should have. In 2026, Peter Greene is 62 years old. The most chilling villain in this film turned out to be a man fighting his own demons off-screen and still standing.
I have a permit for that.
Picture of Kellaway's wife.
We have Jim Dugan as Doyle. Doyle was Kellaway's loyal, slightly dim but good-natured partner, the perfect comedic foil to Peter Riegert's straight-laced frustration. Jim Dugan brought an easy, likable energy to the role that made every scene he shared with Riegert feel effortlessly funny. He was in his early 40s during filming, a working character actor who had spent years building exactly the kind of reliable craft that directors call when they need someone to get it right on the first take. What most fans never knew is that Jim Dugan represents the backbone of every successful Hollywood production, the professional whose name rarely appears above the title, but whose presence makes everything around him work better. He continued working steadily across film and television productions for years after The Mask, accumulating credits quietly and consistently without ever chasing a spotlight that wasn't built for him. In 2026, Jim Dugan is in his early 70s. A career built entirely on reliability, craft, and showing up, and in an industry built on ego that turns out to be rarer and more valuable than almost anything else. The Mask brought together a cast that nobody could have fully predicted would land the way it did. A rubber-faced comedian at the absolute peak of his explosive energy, a first-time actress who stopped every room she walked into, a stand-up genius whose private pain never showed in his performance, and a collection of character actors who held the whole thing together with the kind of craft that doesn't get enough credit. Some of those stories ended in tragedy. Some of those careers burned longer and brighter than anyone expected. But every single one of them left something behind on that screen worth remembering. Now here's the question worth settling in the comments. Who do you think gave the most underrated performance in The Mask? Most people say Jim Carrey, and they're not wrong. But someone else in this cast deserved far more recognition than they ever got. Drop your answer below. Let's see if this audience catches it.